Oh, I see her. Here we go.
There's Rocky.
Yeah.
I see her popped up.
Yeah.
So
Hi,
sorry.
Rocky.
Hi, how are you? I thought it was a different link, so I was looking at the wrong place.
I had to dig around forever too. Hi, I'm Lisa, manager of Buffalo Street Books.
This is my
We love
boss.
your book, and we've got a bunch of people on from all of our organizations. Liz Allen from NAMI, Lynn Steck from the Advocacy Center, Scott McLeod's from the Sophie Fund, and Leah Wardlaw is an intern at the Advocacy Center, and you know Isabella. And Eleanor Henderson is a wonderful writer if you haven't already read her works, and on my board and teaches at IC, so she's helping too. So do you guys need to chat at all about your structure? I'm going to do a general like welcome, talk a little bit about the bookstore, introduce what did I say I was going to do?
Introduce. Talk about the store. I mean, you can talk a little bit. I think the others, you can talk a little bit about why we decided to maybe like include.
And then introduce you and Leah just briefly, and then one of you will introduce Rocky, or shall I introduce Rocky?
I mean, I can introduce Rocky.
Okay, sounds like a plan. All right, I'm gonna let people in then.
Okay.
I'm gonna give everybody a few more minutes, just like another minute maybe. It is just 7:01. We're all very prompt. I'm trying to tell my mother how to get on.
No, I know the feeling with my grandmother.
Okay. Let's see, is everybody in who wanted to be in?
And there might be some people who join.
Yeah, I'll pay attention to that. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started so we'll have plenty of time to hear from Rocky and to have our conversation. Welcome everyone, I'm Lisa from Buffalo Street Books. This is an event that is part of our BSB at Home virtual reading series that we've been doing during the pandemic and potentially probably for the foreseeable future. We started talking about this. It was going to be an in-person event. We wanted to do this partly started from Isabella, who first loved the book and then got me to read it. And then I fell in love with the book, and we just got talking about it. And really first we reached out to the Advocacy Center, and we really wanted it to be part of Mental Health Awareness Month. And we really wanted to include community partners, just thinking that helps reach more people in our community for whom this might be a really valuable book to have. So we're very excited about it. And to reiterate, among those partners, we have the Sophie Fund here in Ithaca. We have the Advocacy Center of the Finger Lakes? Tompkins County, I think. And we have NAMI Finger Lakes participating. And they're all also on here because, you know, this book, A Breath Too Late, Rocky Callen's book, it deals with issues of domestic violence and suicide. And we want to have resources available that may be helpful if any of you need to talk about some of those issues. And we also just want to say that, you know, use your own best judgment about whether it's an appropriate conversation for you to be a part of right now or not. But we're really, really glad you're here. Buffalo Street Books is doing its very best to hold its own during the pandemic. And we have an online, our bookstore is now online. We got online literally like a couple days after we had to close. Like we were already working on developing the online site. So you can order books from us. We have Rocky's book, of course. And these days we're also doing, you know, front of store delivery or we can ship. So that's important to know. We have two co-presenters working with Rocky Callen tonight. Leah Wardlaw is a senior at Ithaca High School and an intern with the Advocacy Center. And Isabella Agbalumani, how'd I do this with the pronunciation? Yeah.
Without the G.
Oh, Blumani, okay. Is rising junior, I would guess, yeah. Almost, at Cornell University, and worked part-time for us at the bookstore when she's around and even when she's far away, apparently. So Isabella, we're going to welcome first, and she will introduce Rocky. Thank you all for coming, and stay on mute for now. We're going to have questions at the end, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Like Lisa said, my name is Isabella. I guess Ithaca is mainly my home during most of the year. I was expecting it to be my home for a little bit longer than it was this year, but I really love the town. It's really become my other home outside of where my family is. I am a very avid YA reader, and that's kind of why I was able to start working at Buffalo Street Books, working to, you know, get more teens reading and get more YA books into those hands. And so we read a lot. We get lots of books from publishers. And I remember there was a blurb from Publishers Weekly when this book was announced, and I thought, oh, that sounds really good. And lo and behold, we got an advanced copy of it in the mail at the store, and I took it home. And there are so few times where a book has me, you know, or I feel so passionate about a book. And it's like really the first book that has ever made me sob. And I don't cry when reading books. And this book was just so incredibly beautiful. I haven't felt that way about a book since reading probably The Hate U Give, which is one of, if not my favorite book of all time. So it was amazing to read this book and to then pass it on to all of these people in the Ithaca community. And I was so excited to be able to connect with Rocky, because it's always like kind of a fangirl moment when you get to connect with an author of a book you absolutely love. So I'm so excited to be co-moderating this event and to introduce Rocky to you all. I want to get everything right, so apologies if I'm looking down. But Rocky Callen is the daughter of an Ecuadorian immigrant, and she's very much into living a life of service and of activism. And she even interned at NASA at the age of 12, which if I tried that, they would turn me away. She also was advocating for undocumented immigrants at the age of 13 and was also lobbying Congress at that age as well. She received her MFA from the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and she is also the founder of the Bleed Ink Foundation, which is a creative hub and resource for writers, which I bet is particularly useful during this time. And she also founded the Hold On to Hope project, which unites creatives in suicide prevention and mental health awareness. And A Breath Too Late is her debut novel. And we love this book so, so much. And we're so excited to have you here, Rocky.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I remember when I got the review you wrote about A Breath Too Late, it was screenshot and sent to me And I was in New York to meet my agent and my editor, and I was like coming out of the New York subway, and I looked down at my phone and saw the screenshot of your review. And as conversation about this event, which was going to be live in person before, it was really such a phenomenal moment for me, because you guys put so much thought and effort and love into curating something that it was so inclusive of community. And that is what I wanted with A Breath Too Late. I always wanted it to be something that would be part of a larger conversation. And so I'm just so grateful to be here with everyone, but also just to everyone who is putting this event on and making it possible. Thank you so much.
We're so excited to have you here. It's such an important book, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart when I say that this book will save lives. And it's such an important book during this time when I think we could all use a lot of hope. And so with that, I think we're going to segue into starting with some questions. So if you could open by sort of telling us about A Breath Too Late, sort of, because of course you can explain it better than I can, and maybe describe it in 3 words. If you could describe it in 3 words as well.
Sure. So 3 words would be tragic, honest, and hopeful. A Breath Too Late is about a girl who dies by suicide on the very first page, and then faces the brokenness she's left behind, and also has to retrace her memories to understand what led up to that moment and to that day. And as she's straddling the past and the present, she is witnessing not only the domestic violence in her home, not only the escalation of her own depression, but she's also witnessing the hope and the possibilities that existed when she didn't even know it. And so my hope with this book is that people can also bear witness. I think that so often we go through our life, and like even right now, we're in a climate of such uncertainty, and it is often so hard to find that hope in those dark places. But we need to be fierce in our quest to find them. And I wanted to show the regret and the love. At its heart, it's a love story to so many characters in Ellie's life, but it's also a love story to life.
Yeah, that definitely comes across in the book. So you also chose to tell the story in an epistolary format. So it's sort of written, it's written through letters, but the unique thing about it is it's not just written to people such as Ellie's mother, or her father, or her friend August. She writes to life, to death. She writes to words, and it's really, really beautiful. And so I'm wondering sort of how you came to the decision to tell this story through in that format.
So it really chose me. It wasn't a conscious decision. Just when I started writing, it came out in letters, and it came out in that way. But as it was going on, I recognized, because when I started writing back in 2013, and it was just pouring out of me, you know, a lot of those things, the things that I did in the book were things that a lot of times, like, English teachers say don't do, with the use of second person and things like that. And so I had to decide, is this how I'm going to proceed forward? Is this how I'm going to craft this novel? And I realized that I wanted it to be that way because, one, I wanted it to be this sense of intimacy with the reader, with the use of you and how everything is addressed. And I wanted, and on a subconscious level, for people to recognize that we can be anyone in Ellie's story, just like we can be anyone in our own. And I included things that were beyond people, like life to death, to the flyer in her locker, to all these things, because I think that we often forget how important not just people, but concepts and things are to us. When I signed my book contract, it was a virtual signing, and I just took handwriting from my grandparents and surrounded myself with mementos of them, because it made me feel like they were anchors, like they were there. And I think that we have to look in our life and find, as in the book, Ellie calls them talismans, of what anchors us, what centers us. And so I wanted to write the book in a way that included all of that. And the other thing that was very important to me is Ellie also writes to her depression. And for me, it's really important when I'm going through my own depressive episodes for me to be able to separate it out as I'm a person experiencing depression versus I am depression, and to know that I can have this, be able to separate the two. And so in the book, we also see her wrestling with that depression, her grappling with it. And I think that that's honest to what a lot of people feel like with whatever mental health condition they may have, whatever circumstance they may be living with. And so I feel like the letters really encompass so much of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it was really an incredible sort of stylistic choice. And I can't imagine the book being written any other way. But going off of that, and it's not really a spoiler to say, but the first letter, the book opens with Ellie writing to death, and it ends with her writing to life. And it can sometimes be missed if you're not, because depending on it, whether you read the book in one sitting or in multiple sittings, but it's a really incredible choice to choose to do that. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you chose to start with writing to death and ending with writing to life.
Yes, so the ending with writing to life was done in revision, but it was, once I realized that was what I wanted to do, it was such a like hug from my book, essentially. I can't explain it any other way, because we open with tragedy. Like from the very first page, there is no mystery around what has happened, and the truth of what has happened will not change in this book. And that's because I wanted to show the permanence of that. And what I wanted the reader to be left with was that beyond all of this tragedy, that there was still a life worth fighting for. And the very last bit was Ellie saying that she loved her life. And I think that's really an important thing to be left with, and an important thing to hold close, especially in those rough moments.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about where the inspiration for Breath Too Late came from? Was it something that had sort of been building up within you for a while, or was it something that there was just something you saw and all of a sudden the spark was there and you sat down to write? But sort of where did the inspiration for this book come from?
So the inspiration came from, one, I think writers, creatives, you get threads of things, over time. And I don't even remember when the first thread of Ellie's mom came to me, but she came to me first. And I didn't even realize that until doing all these interviews this month, because I didn't think that far back. But what brought the story all together was the very first page I wrote online on World Suicide Prevention Day as a flash fiction piece. And it was from the perspective of, I was a person that had grappled with suicidal ideation and consideration of moving forward with that. And I thought about all of the life I would have missed if that choice had been made all those years ago. And I wrote that piece as if that moment had happened differently for myself. And someone commented underneath it and said, "Oh, is this your book?" And my vehement reaction was no, because I just knew that wrestling with this story would take me to a place that I didn't know if I was ready for. And yet the story kept knocking on my heart. I could not avoid it. And I procrastinated and procrastinated. And then finally I sat down to write, and I wrote the first draft in just over a week, through the night, sobbing every single day. And I wrote it at night because I didn't want my family to be worried about me. And the writing of the book, it forced me to face a lot of memories that I had locked away. And it also made me face my own depression in a way that was so honest, and also made me think that it is okay to be vulnerable. And I realized the importance of the story after that, because I realized that by Ellie telling her story, it was allowing other people space to tell their own and to feel safe in telling their own. And so that was the inspiration. And I had someone critique it, and they said that it broke their heart and stitched it back together at the same time. And that is when I realized that it was a story worth sticking with and pursuing. And that was back 2013 was when I wrote the first page. 2014 was when I wrote the first draft. And then it's just been teasing it and fleshing it out ever since.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect, whoever was it described how it kind of breaks your heart and then stitches it back together is a perfect way to describe how the book makes you feel. I'm going to turn it over to Leah to ask some more questions.
It's great to meet you, Leah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to move into some questions about characters. So my first question is, the character of the father is such an accurate example of a manipulating and controlling person, which is shown through like his actions from the moment that the reader meets him. So I was wondering what it was like to write the character of the father.
It was very difficult. It was very difficult because, like I mentioned, it forced me to look at memories and look at really the trajectory of my childhood, and then also other people that I had witnessed go through very similar situations. And it is so difficult because a lot of times you see the line of straddling love and pain with these characters. And one of the things that at the beginning, all of the rage and the pain came out. And as I was revising, a lot of people didn't understand, like, why would someone stay? Like, that was a big question. And it's so difficult to explain to someone who is on the outside of that experience. But through revision, I also teased in something that I feel is really accurate, like you mentioned, to this sort of relationship, is how it doesn't start with absolute destructive behavior. A lot of times it's these little manipulations that come out over time, that then there's more and more control over the significant other, the spouse, the partner, that you sort of wake up and you realize how much of yourself you gave away in that process. And so it was really difficult sometimes to hold his character and to write him, because I didn't want to make it just a flat character. I really wanted to show the full experience of who he was. But ultimately, I think that we see these men so often, we like in terms of the statistics of domestic violence. And I think it's really important for people to understand that they exist and that people are trying to find their way out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was such a good way of explaining it, but the little by little, like the growing manipulation. And so that ties into my next question, which is, are you familiar with the power and control wheel? And did it, if you are, did it impact the way that you wrote the character of the father and the scenes of domestic violence at all?
So when I was writing the book, I did not have that in mind. What I had in mind was just a general concept of agency. So what takes away agency from a person, from any person? And that wheel is absolutely representative of what that is. The emotional, the economic, the physical, all of those pieces come together to disable agency if we continue to become entrenched in that. And so for me, Regina, who's Ellie's mom, for those who haven't read, she was a person, like I wanted to show that she was this whole person with her own dreams and her own character, and there's a lot of nods to that, even though it's off the page, of who she was before this relationship. And then we see that being chipped away over the course of her life with this man. And again, it's those tiny moments and those tiny things that just continue to manipulate and assume more and more control. And I think this is like a side rant from this particular question, because it's such an important one, is that I think for young people, but for anyone, we have to really talk about relationships and healthy relationships and toxic relationships. Because a lot of times we look at, in high school, we get first boyfriends or we get first partners, and they come up with all sorts of narratives for really toxic behavior. And we have to identify them early so that way we don't fall in step with letting those take control of us.
Yeah, again, absolutely perfect in terms of a segue into the next question, because my next question is about August and Ellie and their relationship in comparison to Ellie's parents' relationship. So there's such a contrast. August and Ellie is such a stark contrast to Regina and Ellie's father. So maybe could you talk a little bit about how August and Ellie's relationship reflects a healthier and more positive relationship, especially in comparison to Ellie's parents' relationship, despite their young age?
Yes. And I really did want August to be such a contrast to Ellie's father, and to really demonstrate masculinity in the full spectrum of it. Because what we see with August is that he is a constant. He is there to give respect and to be witness to Ellie, to see her for who she truly is. Whereas with her father, he wanted everyone to bow down to what he wanted to see. And that was such a big part of drafting and creating both of those characters, because one wanted to coexist with another person, whereas the other wanted to control the other person. And I felt like Ellie needed an example of a person in her life, a significant other, a man in her life, that wasn't there to cage her or hurt her. And there was a part in the book where she actually she's reluctant to give into her feelings for August because she's fearful. She's fearful of what that will turn into. And her mother said that not all men are the same, and not all people are the same, and that you shouldn't close your heart. And I think that's really important for us to realize that so often we have to just be very aware. We have to be very aware of how we are coexisting with another person. Because another person, and this is a separate thing, another person could be a fine and lovely person, but you together is not healthy. And so I think that's another part of it. That's like that a more nuanced conversation. But in this, August was a wonderful counterpart for Ellie, and for her to really see who she was when there was no cage.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such a perfect answer to that question. I'm going to send it back over to Isabella for some more writing questions.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd love to know about is, you know, there were so many things that I took away from this book. But if there was one thing that you wanted, you know, particularly teen readers, to take away, if there was one thing that they were to take away from this book, like what do you want that one thing to be?
That hope lives in the dark, that no matter what you're facing, whatever circumstances you're grappling with, whatever inner battle you are raging, that there is possibility, that there always exists a possibility for better, and that tomorrow's worth fighting for. And that can be really hard. That can be really hard. And I wanted to show how hard it could be. But I also wanted to show that even there, hope existed. And I have to say that every time in my personal life I've faced what felt insurmountable odds or devastating darkness, I have lived on to live such miraculous moments, and I want young people to have that chance too.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I really get out of the book was, you know, despite it being, you know, a story that's about something dark, the thing you take most away from it, the message that's the loudest upon finishing it is still one of hope, is one of hope. And that's something that's just really powerful. I'm going to turn it back over to Leah for one last question before we get into some more, like, you know, publishing questions. If you talk a little bit about the gorgeous cover. But yeah.
So one last question that I wanted to talk about, which seems like a good way to lead into talking about the publishing questions, is that there's a lot of breath-related language and imagery in this book. Like, obviously, the title is A Breath Too Late. So other imagery, like, has to do with holding her breath, not being able to breathe, breathing while she's running, and then, like, eventually at the end, kind of letting go of that breath and, like, breathing again. So I was wondering, was this intentional, and is it a part of your, like, practice as a therapist? And could you potentially talk a little bit about the connections between breathing and mental health and emotions?
I love all of your questions, and I think that these are such perceptive questions. So for me, with craft, with writing the story, you know, every day, approximately over 20,000 breaths we take in a day. And I just am such a firm believer in the possibility that exists moment to moment and breath to breath. And we see that taken away from Ellie. And so I felt like, you know, the sustenance of life is to be able to breathe, is your heartbeat, you know, all these things that we take for granted so often, and yet we're being told a story from someone who has had that taken away, and to give new meaning and to give new depth and respect and gratitude for every breath that we do have, and even like all of the nods to the exertion, you know, when she's running, or to hold your breath, like all of these things when we're just living our lives, you know, we can hold our breath in anticipation or in excitement or in fear. Like, these are human experiences. This is a human life that every breath it gives us. And so I wanted to reinforce that idea and that feeling. in the book itself. And then in terms of breathing for a practice and breathing in terms of mental health, one, I always, something that I've said, and this is not related to breath, but it's adjacent, is that I tell people to put their hand on the heart, feel the heartbeat, and it beats for you. The same thing is true for your breath, is that every breath matters. And the practice, I actually do meditation every day. And for me, I find that it helps tremendously doing the breath work, because so often we can get so inundated with thoughts and feelings and just the nuances of everyday life, and of stress on your body, of pain, whatever it may be. But to center on something, on that rhythm, on that anchor of breathing in and breathing out, and to just give space for the significance of that, but give space for allowing the other things that can feel almost claustrophobic to fall away. And so it's a practice that I absolutely have continued for my own mental health. And when I was a behavioral coach, it was a big part of what my clients, what the people I worked with had to do, because a lot of times they're grappling with very severe anxiety, and when you're going on the verge of a panic attack, you can pass out if you don't focus on breathing. It's like, stay here, keep breathing in and out, and that one action alone can bring people back to center and back to present.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'm sending it back over to Isabella now.
Yeah. So one thing that I've just heard, I guess, about the publishing industry is that authors don't generally have too much input on their covers. But this cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's so stunning. But I always love it when they always do, when, something additional is done. And for those who don't know, under the jacket, there's a little bird. It's a paper bird. I don't know if you can see it, but I promise it's there. And it'll make sense once you read the book. And in addition, there's gold text on the spine, which is also very meaningful to what's inside the book. So I guess my question is, did you have any input on that, particularly on the gold text? Because I think that is just so creative. And it's just, it's a question I'm also just curious about, because so many authors do say they don't get to choose who does the cover. They don't,
Yeah, it was legitimately one of my greatest fears about input and the cover, because as a writer, you have this vision for what your book will look like and be in your hands. And I'm just very lucky that, one, my editor and my designer brought me in early on to share my own vision, and they came up with a concept, and then they did a rough mock of that concept, and we wanted to go in a different direction, and they were so receptive to my feedback. And then the gold, on the first mock cover, there was going to be gold on it, but then that cover we moved away from that. And in the new cover, there wasn't gold, but they knew, we all knew the significance of the gold foil. And so for me, it was actually a surprise. The naked cover was a surprise. But it was a nod to those original conversations that we had. So again, it is not common for authors to have that much input into their book cover, but with my team, they were so receptive and wonderful.
Yeah, I'm glad, because it goes face out on my personal bookshelf. But I do want to know, are you working on any projects right now, any new novels or nonfiction books? And And if you are, what genre is it in? Who's the targeted audience? Is it middle grade? Is it adult? Is it going to be another YA book?
Yes, I am. I actually was stepped away from writing for a good chunk of time in the fall and things for medical reasons. And then I came back to it actually during quarantine with renewed vigor and passion. And so I'm working on giving a new proposal to my agent, hopefully this month. And that novel would be another contemporary novel. It would be, again, this is from like agent, so we don't know if this is going to go through. So you guys may never see this book, but it grapples with sexual assault and the fallout after a person asks for help and makes an accusation, and then what a community response is, and especially when you have an unreliable narrator. And I wanted to illustrate the power of belief and the power of sharing your story and the power of demanding your space. And so it's multiple POV, varied timelines. So we shall see if it comes together, but it will be another contemporary.
That sounds so amazing. I sincerely hope many people want to publish that, because I will definitely read it. It sounds incredible. So another question for you kind of is, you know, for readers who connect to A Breath Too Late, who love this story, who connect to, maybe it's the topics in it, who just love the prose, because the prose is just absolutely gorgeous. You only have to, for those of you watching, you only have to read sort of the summary on like the flap of the book to see just how stunning Rocky's prose is. But what books would you recommend to readers who love this book, who love A Breath Too Late?
Absolutely. So there's a few recommendations, but the first one that I want to bring up is Nora Carpenter's Edge of Anything. And it's not necessarily because of the prose or the language, but because I feel like it's such a good counterpart in the mental health discussion. For her, in that book, it's about the exploration of mental health and the power of friendship and the ability to see that no matter your mental health experience, that there are resources for you to keep going. And I think that's a really important part of the mental health discussion. And the other book that meant a lot to me, and I discovered it after I wrote A Breath Too Late, was Jandy Nelson's I'll Give You the Sun. And her prose are just magnificent. That's one thing. But two, it really talks about the redemptive power of art. And in my book, art was a theme. Expression, creativity was a theme that was threaded throughout for many of the characters. And so if people resonated with that, I think that would be another beautiful novel for them to pick up.
Yeah, definitely. And then considering we are all in quarantine, it's kind of a two-part question, but have you read anything recently, like while you're in quarantine, that we should definitely check out, we should pick up, we should order, we should carry in the store? And are there any particular authors, particularly authors who have written, you know, a lot of books that, you know, we can sort of binge read during this time? I'm always looking to hear what other authors are reading.
Yeah, so my tastes vary tremendously. But the book that I read during quarantine that I felt was packed a punch was Nonieka Ramos's Disturbed Girls Dictionary. I think that's the title. she just has this power with the vernacular and with storytelling that is phenomenal. And she's an educator, and she really is just breaking down an experience in such a phenomenal way. So I loved that book. I love fantasy, and I also love like things set in like Regency era. So basically I'm actually on an active search for more of those. Feel free to send me recommendations. I just read Chain of Gold.
Oh yeah, Cassandra Clare. Yeah.
Cassandra Clare was one of the people that got me back into like reading for fun years ago, and so I always pick up her books whenever they come out. And then Courtney Summers is an author that has a lot of books out there, and I just love Courtney Summers. she has this gorgeous, beautiful confidence that I think that we should all emulate, but also her books, she really grapples with the unlikable female character. And, you know, definitely put that in quotes, because a lot of times there's a ferocity and an anger in those characters that aren't often expressed. And I love seeing that in books.
Yeah, those are great recommendations. And for those of you who don't know, Cassandra Clare has so many books out. They range from taking place in like Victorian England to present day in different series. And if you like fantasy, if you like angels and demons and all of that, definitely check her out. And with that, I think we're gonna take some audience questions. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Rocky about the book, about publishing, about the writing process?
One thing while or if any questions come in, and then you guys can always interrupt me, but something that's been coming up a lot, and there's so many debut authors that came out during the pandemic, so I definitely urge readers to go and find their books and support them. Because of course, when all of this came out, there was this sense of grief that the launches that we were looking forward to were taken, because of course they had to be. And I've been in many conversations in the last week from debut authors who are wondering, like, why market? You know, does my story even matter now? To aspiring writers who are struggling to write in this time, in this era. And I really am always here for a pep talk. I always tend to give them to the people that I care about and people that are creatives. And one of the things is just like, when the world shut its doors, people turn to artists of all kinds. And that's why bookstores matter. And that's why this book community matters, and writers matter, and creatives and artists matters, because they can offer hope, and they can offer story, and they can offer a moment of escape, and they can offer so much within those pages. And so to never devalue that, and to never devalue your creative expression, and that anyone out there creating just shows other people that there's space for them to create too. And so I think that when we're looking at these conversations, and we're looking at like my mother and my sister are visual artists, and there's such healing there. So even if you're, stuck at home, to find some space for yourself to create something, and to know that that has value, and to know that that can heal. And I just am such a vehement believer in that art heals and can transcend so much, and to be an outlet for justice in many respects. The artists are the ones that often are disruptive and often inspire masses. And so collectively, we can continue that work even in isolation.
no one's ever said that better. But yeah, that was, yes, bookstores are so important. And one of my favorite things about living in Ithaca was just how much of a community sort of based town it was. Like there's an independent bookstore 2 blocks from my grandmother's house. I mean, we live walking distance, but can't get her to like order from there and not from Barnes and Noble. And it's so great that, you know, I feel like everyone who wants a book comes into the independent bookstores, and it really shows us how valued we are and how important what we do is to the community. And since we have a little bit of time, I am going to have Rocky do a little bit of a reading so you can see just a taste of how incredible the book is. But Leah had also come up with, had brainstormed sort of a question about living with the threat of violence. And I think it'd be great if she could voice that question since we have some time.
Yeah, sure. So the question that I was going to ask that had to do with living with the threat of violence was that, so living with the threat of violence will have an incredible impact on anyone's mental health, and it clearly contributed to Ellie's depression. So I was wondering if you have any suggestions for people who have grown up with domestic violence, or for teens who are living with someone who is abusive now, just because we're in a time where everybody is kind of trapped. And so if you're living in a healthy household, then maybe you're a little fed up with the people around you. But if you're living in an unhealthy household that is abusive, right now is about the worst time to be living in such a type of household. So I was wondering if you just have any suggestions.
It's always such a difficult place to reside in terms of, there was talks about pushing the publication date of this book because of quarantine. And we talked with my publisher, my agent, and we decided that right now, these issues matter more than ever. In isolation, mental health and domestic violence issues matter more than ever. And often, I've heard this from teachers, you know, when they're doing their Zoom calls and then you see the environment some of their students are in and the toxic behavior that's going on behind the screen, that they're witness to things that they didn't know of before. And I think the biggest thing is to know that even in isolation, hope still exists, not just hope, help still exists. In the back of the book, there are resources available that are available 24/7. There are organizations like the incredible ones on this call that are helped make this night happen. And to look for those resources, especially if you're in a truly unsafe environment. My sister is a crisis counselor at a domestic violence shelter, and they are right now finding homes and places for people to go when needed. And I know that especially when you're a young person in these homes, that you can feel very helpless. But one of the biggest things that I wish I had been more aware of were that there were people out there to help, professionals that were out there to help, organizations that were out there to help free of charge. Like that was a big thing. That was a big barrier, was funds to be able to do things. With my sister's, where she works, like they go and they pick up people from places because a lot of people can't afford the bus ticket, or like Ellie, their transportation and mode is like taken from them. There's resources, and to search for them and to know that you do not have to suffer in silence and you do not have to suffer alone, and that often secrecy is such a part of the living experience when you're in a home that's domestically violent. You feel like you have to keep it secret. And one of the things I wanted to show with the book, and one of the things I want to tell young people, is that they should not bear the burden of that pain on their own, and that those secrets can, once shared, they can find help and resources to help them out of it and to hopefully help their families too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rocky. And I just wanted to really quickly plug that the Advocacy Center is one of those local organizations, and I'm pretty sure that Lynn dropped some information, including our hotline, into the chat box. So, yeah, back to you, Isabella.
And what you just said, Rocky, sort of is exactly what I mean when I say that this book will save lives. It's just such an important novel. And like you said, I'm so glad that it wasn't pushed, because I know so many books were pushed, some even to 2021 that were supposed to be coming out now. And I'm so glad that, that you and those around you were able to maybe make the big decisions, were able to see the value and how important it was to get this book out as soon as possible. And with that, I'm wondering if you want to start, maybe you read a couple of pages from this book and give people a taste of this incredible story. I mean, I think I speak for all of us that have been working on this event, that this book really is, it's so incredible. And even if it's not something that you feel you're ready to read right now, there might be, maybe pick up a copy for someone in your life who is, because it's just such an important book, and something that I'm just so glad that, I wish I had this book when I was in high school as well, just that sense of hope, even if you're not dealing with some of the issues that are in this book, it's the message that it gives off is one of hope, and that's something that everyone can use. So hopefully there's also someone in your life or someone you know who could also appreciate this title, because it's really incredible.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's made this possible. I'm actually going to read toward the end, because I think that would be a proper place to round out this conversation for anyone who needs to hear it. Hope can't be a hollow wish or dream. It needs to be filled, levied, brimming over with intention and action and belief and reaching, stretching until your muscles ache because you want it that damn much. And you won't stop reaching until you hold it, until it's yours. Life. You are broken, often ugly, and always too much. But you also hid promises in pockets, tucked hope under mattresses, and crammed 1,000 perfect moments between the shards of sharp and treacherous ones. I am sorry I'd forgotten them. I'm sorry I didn't even see. And a breath too late, I realized I loved you. Thank you everyone so much for this time, for this space, for this community. I feel like this is how events around this book and books like it should happen, in community, with partnerships, with nonprofits, with resources, and with booksellers, because there is just such beautiful communion that happens in that space. And I'm just so grateful to each of you for making this possible.
Yeah. And also just a quick note that I believe the Advocacy Center is giving away a couple of copies, a few copies.
Yes. So I'm a part of the teen activism group from the Advocacy Center, and we have a book giveaway of Rocky's book. And it's, if you comment below one of our posts, then you can be put into the raffle to win one of the books that we've decided to purchase. So yeah.
Great. Well, I'm gonna just say, Rocky, it's been a true pleasure. I feel like when you were talking about the importance of creativity in community, that what I have found with a lot of these Zoom events is that they really can do that. And it's amazing that they can do that. So we really appreciate you bringing that to us tonight. we're so grateful to all of our partners who were willing to be a part of this with us. We look forward to working with you all on many future events. Thank you all for coming. And Rocky, thank you so, so much. And Isabella and Leah, awesome job. Thanks, everybody. Take care. And also, we have another reading on Monday with Jenny Lee, the author of Anna K. Isabella is going to actually facilitate that one too. So look on our website.
Very different book, but it's also a YA title. So if you have any teen readers who might like to tune in, definitely let them know. But thank you so much to Rocky and to everyone to all of these amazing organizations who partnered with us for this event and who were so supportive, and took the time to read and to reread the book. It means so much, and I'm so glad that sort of the first event that I got to sort of help organize with the store was one that really involved the Ithaca community. And it's one I miss every day, being
we'll be back
in the Midwest. Yeah,
thanks,
hopefully
everyone.
in the fall, but.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.